I grew up in an all Chevy family, and for some reason I saw this car and I had to have it, and I had to have a true 64 and a half. I would not settle for a 65. I was very stubborn, and when I was 15, I was lucky enough to find her.
She walked into one of the most male-dominated spaces on television. Grease under her nails, a wrench in her hand, and a face that made people do a double take. Constance Nunes spent 6 years as the only woman in Gotham Garage on Netflix's Car Masters, Rust to Riches. Fans fell in love with her. Brands lined up to work with her. And then, almost quietly, everything started to shift. The show got canceled, her marriage collapsed, and the woman who seemed to have it all was rebuilding from scratch. So what really happened to Constance Nunes? The answer is a lot more layered than most people know. The show was canceled, and she confirmed it herself. Here's the thing nobody really talks about when it comes to Constance Nunes. The show that made her famous no longer exists. Car Masters, Rust to Riches ran for 6 seasons and 48 episodes on Netflix.
You can harness all that hot air and get up behind this car.
Is there anything we're not allowed to do to this?
With its final season dropping in October 2024. And then, nothing. No renewal, no announcement, just silence. It was Constance herself who broke the news. On Instagram, she confirmed that the show had been canceled a while ago. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said plainly that 6 seasons is a long run for any show, and that sometimes networks are ready to move on to fresh ideas. It wasn't bitter, it wasn't dramatic, but it was final. For context, the show premiered back in September 2018 and became one of Netflix's most-watched automotive reality series. The premise was simple but effective. The crew at Gotham Garage, led by Mark Towell, would take in beat-up classic cars, give them high-end modern makeovers,
But one of the pit bosses told me they got a vault for all of the old gaming machine parts.
and flip them for profit. It worked for a while. According to data from Netflix's own weekly top 10 charts, the show's viewership had been steadily declining season over season. The audience was shrinking. Netflix had also been on a broader sweep in 2025, canceling over 20 unscripted series, including shows that still had loyal fan bases. Car Masters was one of them. So when fans started noticing Constance wasn't posting about a new season, they weren't imagining things. The show was done. But was Constance done? That's a very different question. And the answer leads somewhere far more interesting. Before the fame, there was a girl fired by her own father. To understand why the cancellation didn't break Constance Nunes, you have to understand where she came from. And it starts in a garage in Thousand Oaks, California, with a dad who refused to go easy on her. Constance was born on November 17, 1989, to Ernie and Norma Nunes. Her father's family is of Portuguese descent, and her dad wasn't just a car enthusiast. He ran his own hot rod shop and drag raced on weekends. Growing up, the Nunes family would load up an RV and spend entire weekends at the drag strip. For most kids, weekends meant cartoons. For Constance, it meant carburetors. She didn't just watch from the sidelines. She got in the garage. She helped. She got her hands dirty. And at some point, and this part is worth sitting with, her own father fired her. Not to be cruel, but because he didn't show her any preferential treatment. If she wasn't pulling her weight, she was out, daughter or not. That attitude became the foundation of everything she later built. By the time she was 16, Constance had bought her own car, a 1964 and a half Ford Mustang, and yes, she insists on the and a half, because it matters technically. She restored it herself, sourcing only original 1964 parts and named it Baby Stang. That car became her signature.
You brought us Baby Stang.
I did.
1965 Mustang.
It's a 64 and a half, actually.
At SEMA 2023, she brought it back out and said it was the build she was most proud of. Not because it was the flashiest, but because she built it in a way that could realistically inspire anyone to try. "That's everything," she said about the idea of inspiring other enthusiasts to keep their classics on the road. Before she ever appeared on a TV screen, Constance had already clocked professional time at some of Southern California's most respected dealerships: BMW, Audi, Acura, and Ford, working in service departments and as an aftermarket director. This wasn't a hobby. This was a career built the hard way over nearly 2 decades before a single camera was pointed at her. The Doubters, the Kaya commercial, and proving everyone wrong. When Constance Nunes first showed up on CarMaster's Rust to Riches, a significant portion of viewers didn't believe she was a real mechanic, and they weren't quiet about it. The criticism had a familiar shape. She was too pretty to be under a hood. She was probably just there for the cameras. She was a model playing a mechanic.
Can you help me throw the seats in?
Ooh, that's a tight fit.
Perfect. So check this out.
It's the kind of skepticism that follows women into male-dominated industries, and Constance had been navigating versions of it her whole life. Even on the show itself, she was sometimes referred to on-screen as the Motor Girl, a label that, whether intentional or not, managed to be both a nod to her role and a subtle diminishment of it at the same time. But here's what the doubters missed. Constance had already been building a dual career for years before the show existed, and both halves of it were legitimate. On the modeling side, she'd worked for Wrangler, Jockey, Farrell Cosmetics, and Jaya Lux label. She appeared in print ads for Jeep. She appeared in music videos for Enrique Iglesias and Paris Hilton. She did stunt work in Dodgeball and in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th films in the Bring It On franchise. None of that was pretending to be a car person. That was a separate career running in parallel with her automotive work. And in 2016, before most people had ever heard of her, she appeared in a Kia commercial that aired during the Super Bowl, working alongside actor Christopher Walken. That was network television during the most-watched broadcast of the year, and she had earned her place in it entirely on the basis of her work as a model and media personality. She wasn't trading on her mechanic credentials. She hadn't even had a TV show yet. Then, in 2019, Constance became the first woman ever to star in a national commercial for Edelbrock, one of America's most respected manufacturers of specialty automotive performance parts. That's a company whose entire audience is made up of serious car people. They don't cast someone for visual appeal alone and risk their credibility. They chose Constance because she could speak to their audience with authority, because she genuinely knew the product, and because she had the automotive resume to back it up. That's a meaningful distinction. Around the same time, she partnered with rockstar performance garage owner Nick Ashby on one of the more unusual builds of her career. A real-life version of the Quadra Type 66, the signature car from the Cyberpunk 2077 video game. The base was a 1970 Ford Mustang Fastback, with only 37,000 original miles on it. The build involved a full carbon fiber body overhaul, modern fuel injection, a MagnaFlow dual exhaust, coil-over suspension, 4-wheel disc brakes, and a custom Quadra Yellow wrap. Constance was brought in specifically because of her Mustang expertise, and her involvement wasn't cosmetic. The garage owner made it clear her technical input shaped key decisions on the build. The finished car was given away as a sweepstakes prize, and the project got significant coverage in the automotive media. It was the kind of collaboration that straddles pop culture and serious fabrication, and it wouldn't have worked without someone who actually knew Mustangs. Beyond the cyberpunk build, Constance has maintained long-running partnerships with some of the most credible names in the performance automotive world: MagnaFlow, Mickey Thompson Tires, VP Racing Fuels, Nitto Tires, 4 Wheel Parts, Classic Industries, and Celine Automotive. These aren't companies that hand out ambassador deals lightly. They exist to sell to serious enthusiasts who know the difference between a brand rep and an actual builder. Constance has held these partnerships while also running her own shop, competing in rallies and appearing on television. Which is worth noting, because maintaining credibility across all three simultaneously is genuinely difficult. Most people who get famous on reality TV lose their industry standing over time. She did the opposite. On the show itself, Constance held the title of engine specialist and was one of 4 key team members alongside Mark Towell, Sean Pilot, Tony Quinones, and Michael Caveman Pyle. She wasn't there as window dressing. She also appeared on the cover of Ultimate Wheel and Tire Guide in June 2015, well before Netflix came calling, which tells you something about how the automotive press had already positioned her. She's been featured at SEMA for 3 consecutive years, with her builds exclusively showcased at the event. When Nick Viall asked her on his podcast whether she considered herself a trailblazer, she pushed back, and her answer was more interesting than the expected one. She said there are already a lot of women in the auto industry, and that she's less of a trailblazer and more of a representative. Someone with a big platform who reflects a reality that already exists but rarely gets shown. That framing says something about how she sees her own role, not as an exception, but as evidence. The marriage nobody knew about, and the divorce that happened in the middle of a pandemic. Here's something that surprised a lot of fans when it came out. Constance Nunes had been married for years before most of her audience even knew about it. His name is Jared Toller.
But all I want to do is give you everything that makes you happy. I want you to smile every day.
He's a car enthusiast and amateur motocross racer. Not exactly a surprising match for someone like Constance. They first crossed paths at a party thrown by a mutual friend well after high school, and the shared obsession with cars did the rest. They dated for 8 years before getting engaged in 2018, then married on February 9th, 2019 at Newhall Mansion in Piru, California. The wedding had an all-black dress code, black gown, black cake, cars on display wherever they could fit them. It was one of the few times Constance let her personal life surface publicly, and by all accounts it felt exactly like the people involved. For most of her audience, though, this entire chapter of her life was invisible. Constance had made a deliberate choice to keep her relationship off social media. While she was building a following of over 1 million people on Instagram by documenting automotive builds and industry events, Jared was absent from that picture entirely. He had no verified public profile, no social media presence worth noting. He operated completely out of the spotlight, and the couple appeared to have made a mutual decision that their private life would stay that way. That privacy was actually respected for years, and it also meant that when things fell apart, almost no one who followed Constance saw it coming. In June 2020, just over a year into the marriage, Jared Toller filed for divorce at the Orange County Superior Court. The filing became public record. That's how the majority of fans found out the marriage had even existed, not through an announcement, not through a candid post, but through a court document that surfaced in the press. The divorce was finalized by the end of that same month. Neither Constance nor Jared have publicly disclosed specific reasons for the split, but the circumstances of 2020 tell a story on their own. In January of that year, Constance had been set to appear at the Toronto Motorama Custom Car and Motorsports Expo, and then the pandemic arrived, and the entire landscape changed overnight. Events vanished. Garages had to shut down or dramatically reduce. The Netflix show paused production. For someone like Constance, whose income was built across live appearances, brand partnerships, and active builds, that kind of shutdown doesn't just affect cash flow. It removes the structure of daily life. And at the same time, her father was fighting cancer. Constance publicly revealed that Ernie Nunes had been diagnosed with esophageal cancer during this period, and that he had nearly not made it through. He eventually went into remission, but the weight of that, for someone whose entire sense of identity was built in her father's garage, who credits him directly with the career she has, isn't something that sits quietly alongside everything else. It compounds. It changes the shape of the days. Constance eventually spoke about the divorce with more openness than people expected. She returned to a line that helped her process it, that you can be the perfect package at the wrong address. She said it shifted her away from seeing the end of the marriage as a failure and toward understanding it as a timing problem, that two people can be genuinely compatible and still not be able to hold a relationship together when the conditions around them are collapsing at the same time. She's also said plainly that they were too young when they married. There were no children involved. After the separation, she relocated. Jared stepped entirely out of public life and has remained there. By all accounts, the split was civil and handled without spectacle. But 2020 was, by any measure, a lot to carry at once, and Constance carried most of it without making it anyone else's business. Cars by Constance, Gumball 3000, and what she's actually building now. While the show was still running, Constance was already building something that didn't depend on Netflix to survive. Cars by Constance is her own restoration and custom build shop based in Murrieta, California. She serves as owner, CEO, designer, lead mechanic, and builder. The shop specializes in muscle cars from the 1950s through the 1970s, with a particular focus on classic Ford Mustangs from the 1960s. These aren't weekend projects. These are serious, high-end builds, some of which have been showcased at the SEMA show in Las Vegas, one of the most competitive and heavily attended automotive events in the country. She's also shown work at the Performance Racing Industry Show in Indianapolis, which is a trade-level event, not a public fan show. That's not a vanity appearance. That's where industry people go to do actual business. Her industry partnerships back that up. Constance has active professional relationships with Magnaflow, Mickey Thompson Tires, Classic Industries, Celine Automotive, and VP Racing Fuels, all serious automotive brands with no interest in attaching their name to someone who can't do the work. She's also worked with Fortune 500 companies, including Mattel, specifically within the Hot Wheels division. For context, Hot Wheels doesn't partner with automotive personalities to sell a lifestyle. They partner with builders and mechanics who can engage credibly with an audience that cares about actual cars. The partnership fits. Then there was the Cyberpunk 2077 build, which we touched on earlier, and the follow-up, a custom Master Chief Jeep Gladiator, built as part of a holiday giveaway tied to Halo Infinite in December 2021. 2 high-profile gaming franchises, 2 vehicle builds, 2 separate collaborations in the span of about a year. Those aren't random sponsorships. Those are major entertainment brands choosing Constance specifically because she lives at the intersection of car culture and mainstream visibility. Beyond the shop, Constance has been active in competitive driving. She participated in the Targa Trophy, a rally-style road event that attracts serious drivers, and the Gumball 3000 Rally, one of the most well-known and grueling road rallies in the world. In the 2019 Gumball 3000, she had to withdraw early after the vehicle she was competing in, a Hot Wheels-branded Range Rover SVR, was involved in an accident in Greece. She didn't make the finish, but she was there, competing, in a race that most people with a Netflix show would only watch from a hospitality tent. She judged at the Motorfest 441 in Bermuda in July 2023 and has made repeated appearances at WECFest, the Toronto Motorama Show, and SEMA. On social media, her following has grown consistently across all of it, past 1.3 million on Instagram alone. She earns an estimated $1,300 per sponsored post, separate from income from Cars by Constance, brand partnerships, and her television work. Her estimated net worth sits at around $2 million, built across almost 2 decades of real work, not a single lucky break. She's also signed with NTA Talent Agency in Los Angeles for modeling and commercial work, which means that side of her career is still actively managed and generating income independent of anything automotive. She's also been deliberately visible in spaces that matter for her brand, but don't make headlines. She appeared as a celebrity driver and face at the NASCAR Cup Series Toyota/Save Mart 350 at Sonoma Raceway in June 2021. Trackside, not in the stands. She attended the Twin Cities Auto Show in Minneapolis. She judges competitions. She mentors. She blogs about her builds on the cars by Constance website in enough technical detail that the content is actually useful to other mechanics and enthusiasts, not just flattering to herself. Away from the shop and the events, Constance has two Siberian Huskies, Buff and Ranger, who appear regularly on her social channels. It's a small thing, but the way an audience connects with someone between major projects matters as much as the projects themselves. She's not just posting builds, she's showing a life. And the life she shows is consistent with the one she actually has, which in the age of heavily manufactured personal brands is, genuinely, not as common as it should be. In September 2020, during one of the hardest stretches she'd publicly acknowledged, Constance appeared on the Vial Cell Files podcast in an episode titled Be Your Badass Self with Constance Nunes. She talked about what it had actually taken to be treated seriously in a field that still questioned whether she belonged. And she was more specific about it than she'd typically been. She didn't frame it as victimhood. She framed it as a daily decision. Show up, do the work, let the results make the case. 6 years of network television and the cancellation of the show that housed her haven't changed that calculation. That thread runs through everything. The canceled show, the ended marriage, the years of being underestimated, none of it produced a pivot or a reinvention. What she's doing now is a more established, more connected, and a more confident version of what she was doing before any camera ever pointed at her. She builds cars. She runs her own shop. She competes in rallies. She shows up at industry events. She maintains partnerships with companies that could drop her anytime they wanted to, but haven't, because the work is still there and the credibility is real. The Netflix chapter was a big one, but it was never the foundation. The foundation was always the garage, and that part isn't going anywhere. What do you think about what really happened? Constance Nunes from CarMasters. Share with us in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. If this story was moving for you, smash that like button, subscribe for more untold Hollywood tales, and hit the bell so you never miss a drop. Want more? Check out another one of our videos. Thanks for watching.